Well, hello and welcome again to another edition of our walk through artist books, or a stroll down the lane of art. Today we are so privileged to have Lucie Lambert with us. She is a preeminent artist, letter artist, calligrapher. I know there's some dispute over how you should be identified when your special skill is in making letters. But whatever you call her, letter artist or calligrapher, she is amazing and has enormous talent and has made some beautiful books. Actually, I would like to show, I think of Lucie's work as being the ultimate of an illuminated letter. Mm-hmm. So for the moment, could we just turn off the lights and look at the, can you see the illuminated? That is pure gold leaf and applied with incredible skill and exactitude. Okay, we need the lights stand now. Lucie was born in Shawinigan, Quebec. I won't give the year, but I will tell you it was exactly 10 years after I was born. I was not born in Quebec. So she let me pave the way. She received a BA in 1968 from Laval University and a BFA in printmaking, or her major was printmaking, in 1975 from the University of Quebec in Montreal. In 1973, she received practical training in etching techniques at the
Atelier La Courrière? Yes, the La Courrière et Frelot Atelier in Paris.
What she said. I'm not going to attempt that. From 1980 to 1983, Ms. Lambert lived in Paris, where she studied Chinese calligraphy from the Korean painter Haija Bang, and Arab calligraphy from the Iraqi master
Rani Alani.
In 1983, she moved to Vancouver, I believe, and started to study sculpture and jewelry making with Bill Reed. In 1990, she was trained in hand-built ceramics with Laura Lee Lac. Laura Lee Lac. Oh, beautiful.
A Salish woman.
From 1992 to 2008, she was practicing Chinese calligraphy with King Man Lao and with the master Yimtse, thank you. The works of Lucie Lambert have been shown in solo and group exhibitions in many Quebec cities, as well as in Vancouver, London, Paris, and Strasbourg. Her work is found in private and 53 public collections in Europe and North America, including the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the Bibliothèque Nationale in France, in Paris, and John Paul Getty Museum in Malibu. Also the Library of Congress in Washington and the rare book collections of Canadian and American universities. The National Library of Canada and La Bibliothèque Nationale in Quebec were the first to collect her books. And I think the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art is the most recent to collect one of her books. She became an elected member of the Royal Canadian Academy in 2007. She is known most widely as a publisher of 13 livres d'artiste, collaborative works between a poet and herself as printmaker. Her archives as a publisher of books were bought by the National Library of Canada in 2014. And last week, I heard a number of people leave this room and say, that was the very best talk that we've ever heard in the Sherry Grover Gallery. So I'm not putting any pressure on you, but that was Lucie's little warm-up to today's talk. So, it's my joy to introduce you all to Lucie Lambert.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for your presentation. Good morning. Bonjour. I'm glad that you came to know more about this book. It's a painted book. It's a single book. It's the one that I have worked on for 30 years. Not knowing, of course, when I started painting those images, that it would end in the context of an alphabet. But in retrospect, I can tell you that it started when I was in Paris learning Chinese and Arabic calligraphy, and that it will evolve over time to be more daring in drawing the letters of the alphabet. So yes, I came to do what I do by learning very simple in a way compared to what eventually I would learn, like jewelry making is very complicated. But I started with something very simple, working with pen and ink. And that was a real opening of a path, because I could not, it led me to become a printmaker, more of a graphic artist than a painter. In a way, it took me 15 years to open up to colors. And I would like to show you how I was working 50 years ago with pen and ink. And this is a drawing I made in 1969. And as you see, my work is never really figurative nor abstract. It takes from nature the rhythm. I am very interested in basic rhythms such as heartbeat or blow of the winds on the water, and the rhythm came, of course, for me as a child through music. My father was what do you call the person who listens to music? A matter anyway of listening to classical music that shaped really my emotional being. And so I came to draw, but never definitely in reference to nature, but taking from nature rhythms. And here you have could be trees, it could be clouds, it could be a combination of both. And it's the vibration also that brings to life the strokes. It's always more than just the subject matter. It's how I could infuse or inject my own sense of life onto the paper. Because in the end, it's only lines on papers, right? So I'm going to pass this around. And actually, I should say before I go on that I have material that I will pass around clockwise. And At the end, I will take your questions, and I will. Was there another point to mention? That's probably what I need to tell you for now. So this is a drawings that I'm pleased to show you. And then the other aspect of my work as a printmaker, as an artist, I would say, is that it led me to be a printmaker. And as Cynthia mentioned, I acquired a BFA with a major in printmaking. And I worked on different media, silk screens. I have a book in silk screens. This little booklets, I won't pass it around, but afterward, if you want to look, I have other of my books illustrated in this journal, as well as in this one I could pass around. I have published 13 books, and these are illustrated and presented with a short text in these in this brochure of leaflet. And so it the etchings is one of the I worked on silk screens, and then etchings, and then woodcut, wood engravings, and then I have books of. Actually, in my books, always the images come first. I am not the illustrator. And the door, really, the printmaking is so important because it opened the door to publishing. The other factor is, of course, printmaking allows us to have a plate, a copper plate or wood block, and then to print in a limited edition. Normally my editions were 35, 45 copies, and numbered, and always in collaboration with a poet. And the poet would be inspired by the images. Mm-hmm. So except for one book, I have always worked as an artist, taking the initiative to, and then as a publisher, to find collaborators. In a way, there are many ways to access to this field of artist books. Some people come to be artist book publisher through making paper. Other people come to the field by being a bookbinder. Others come to the field as a printer. Others come to the field as a literary, as writers or interested in literature. Other comes to the field as a book designer. I came to the field as a printmaker. And so that the other favorable circumstance was that in 1969, I bond with a writer. My partner for 18 years was a writer. So in a way, as a couple, it was like our type of marriage, because I never had children. But we had, at that level, a kind of bonding and also what was very, of course, this was major, but then also because when I completed my BFA, I was entitled to grants. And for my 3 first books, I had grants from Quebec government to produce my 3 first books. So at least I had the money to produce the books, and then it really helped me to be confident that I could keep going. And this type of work as a publisher is also a self-employed. I have been self-employed all my life as an artist, which is very unusual. But it's the publishing aspect of my work that allowed me to make some money. As in the early days, today is really, I could not do this today because in 1975, when I published my first book, the market was really open. I mean, we were new to the field. And in my case, I represent what we call livres d'artistes, as opposed to artist books. It's a different tradition. It comes from France. It started at the very beginning of the 20th century with Ambroise Vollard as a publisher, who invited poets like Verlaine and what was the name of the and a famous artist, Manet, or eventually he worked with Picasso, and he worked with Matisse, and then, but always in collaboration with very important poets as a joint adventure. As Matisse said, ensemble concertant, working together, not one being more important than the other one. So I come from this tradition that started in Quebec in 1949. In Paris, it started the very beginning of the 20th century, but in Quebec, we followed this tradition. This tradition is very much of giving a lot of importance to the illustrations or the images. Often the images would take not just a place of one side, but would spread over even on the poem side. And there are also large books, like you see, it's quite a large book. But my first book was actually 20 by 26. So just to show you that this book, and it shows that my first part, my first books and the first 15 years of my life, I was really working in black and white. And this was logs floating on the water. And more of those images would show that even at that time, not knowing what I would do of my life, I published this book in 1975, and they were sort of, when I say this book is the result of almost my lifetime of work, is that you can imagine that with logs floating on water, you could have made an N or an M with the logs. It's like segments of letters. At that time, of course, I didn't know, but it was like planting the seeds for what will be eventually the book that you see there. So I became publisher and also a multimedia artist. And through multimedia artists, through learning in Vancouver, especially other trades like jewelry making. The jewelry that I wear are my design and my making of jewelry. And I learned from Bill Reed, which perhaps you know, how he created beautiful artwork. And then I also learned ceramics. And if you are curious about other work of in other medium, I have pictures in this little portfolio. So in a way, the jewelry became useful because when you realize the content of this book, there is an addition of jewelry in the latches that are made in ivory. And ivory, the way the latches are designed, it's a two. When you look at the word, at the letter L, you see it's just a straight line. Mm-hmm. Well, it was very conducive to create a latch in that shape to close the book. And then it's also LL, which are my initials. So Lucie Lambert, closing the book. So I don't know, you probably know what ivory is, but this is the material that I use that I received from somebody working with ivory in France. And then I had, so I am a printmaker, a publisher, multimedia artist, and then my life, as Cynthia mentioned, I was born in Shawinigan, and what is important in Shawinigan is the river. It's the St. Maurice River. And my connection with nature was all my childhood, because I was living in the country and then adjacent, a mile away from the river, where I worked with those logs. And then I spent half of my time in Quebec, half of my life, I should say, in Quebec, and half of my life in Vancouver. I arrived in Vancouver in 1983. And the time I was in Paris, I was working at the Atelier La Courrière. This is a picture of me in 1983. And this little leaflet also gives a description of what Livre d'Artiste is all about. And then in Paris, in 1983, I had a show with a catalog. And this shows how the difference from the drawing that you have seen that I passed around, and the type of etchings I was doing prior to learning Chinese, or actually Arabic calligraphy, is that it came from very linear type of etchings to be more loose through the learning of Chinese, but also Arabic calligraphy. And so this is the real transformation for me, was the learning of these two types of calligraphy. And the advantage of being in Paris is that it was all taught in French. And I could have a personal relationship with these calligraphers. And my time in Paris concluded by an exhibition at the Canadian Cultural Center. And this is my teacher of Chinese calligraphy wrote my name in Chinese. And my name means, Lucie means lux, lucis, it's lumière. So this one is a painting of a woman. She put a little bit of breast here, which is not very traditional, but anyway, she wanted to make it not the man holding the light, but the woman holding the light. And this is the character for light. And the same, my teacher of Arabic calligraphy, just to show you how different it is, it's the same, it's my name, except that it's light on light, as done with the kalam. And the kalam I have that I could pass around. Of course, the Chinese calligraphy is with a brush. And they are quite opposite type of practices, because one is very much in the loose, you know, when you draw, you don't have any, you don't stand on the table. You coordinate your mind, your eyes, your arms, your wrist, your brush and your ink on the paper. And the strokes are very much made with I'll show you here something that would illustrate my Chinese practice of calligraphy. And this is, the meaning is book. It's quite relevant. And this is a very disciplined practice. It's very loose in the doing, and the strokes are done in a certain order. You don't do this randomly. It's very strict order. And it's the very important things is how you allow the space to breathe around the character. So this is the practice that I showed two examples. This one means not yet. That is very different from to come. That is very close in shape to the character to come. So, and you will see that those little round red lines around the character, in my tradition, it would be interpreted as a mistake, but in the Chinese way, when they circle with red means it's good. So that's, I have few goods in those ones. So this is the Chinese, and the Arabic calligraphy. I happen to have had to make my tools here at Zoltan's home. He has, fortunately, bamboo that I could shape to show you the kalam. It's called kalam. And this is made, it's quite simple, but it has to be done in a certain way to work. And the brush is very loose and precise at the same time, and it goes from left to right. And the same with, in a way, what it has in common with Chinese, it's the Arabic lines are also done from left to right, from right to left, but it's all in the wrist and in the hands, and you go backward. So you go backward to design your letter. So what I have done is as I was learning Arabic calligraphy, done something as simple as the letter A in Arabic language, and it means it's alif, and it's repetitive, but instead of making it just repetitive without being interesting, I design a grid at the back and change the direction of the sheet of paper, or change the letter. Like this one is only one letter, but as you see of this one, you have a different letter that you find in the letter D and in the book. And you will see often what you will see in my books is the letter, the dot. The dot is the diamond shape that you see as a background, is also part of the Arabic calligraphy, and it has been very important. It's called the nukta. The nukta, yes, we see it here. Exactly. I'm not going exactly in order. So this is the nukta. And the nukta has been the most important, actually, part of Arabic calligraphy for painting, because they were very inspiring. It's like having water to swim. I would put those dots on the paper, often a colored background, because this is how Arabic calligraphers work. They don't work from a white background. They work from a colored background. As you see, all my images start with some color, with exception maybe of the D, and so it's a stimulation. It's like a mantra that you repeat, and then it leads from ink and kalam drawn on paper to adding to it brush strokes, to take from nature leaves or flowers or rhythm anyway from nature. Sometimes it looks like little birds or like the S. So the nukta is very interesting meaning in Arabic calligraphy. It means dot, of course, but also a seed, a drop of water, and or the semen. So it shows how fecund this mark is of potential. You know, when you think of a seed, it's all contained, but it's also the beginning of each letter of the Arabic calligraphy. So I will pass around examples of that. Where are my glasses? So oh yes, in the 80s, I was as I said, living in Paris, learning Chinese, Arabic calligraphy. And when I moved to Vancouver, I had exposure to Northwest Coast art. But also I went back to study in France medieval techniques. And that's how I came to paint this image of, it's a miniature painted on goat parchment using medieval techniques. It's called the size. Size here means the cut and graft of fruit trees. It was an original interpretation of 14th century miniature from an agricultural history. And I really liked the fact that the image comes out of an A. So at that time in the 90s, I didn't know I would create an alphabet book. But I had sort of prepared the ground by learning how to paint on parchment. And I think I have parchment that, yes, I have parchment here I could show. Let's see. So this parchment is really made of leather without the hair. And this one is a goat vellum. And it takes a whole laboratory to paint on parchment of many different type of pigments. So this is my preliminaries to create a book associating letter with paintings. And I created about 6 or 7 of those, inspired mostly by German 11th century miniature. But this one is, it's a French miniature from the 14th century. And you have to remember it's on parchment and not on paper. So this is now coming to the alphabet book. What is it that this alphabet book? They have many components, many aspects. There is a frontispiece that would be be the first image that you would see. In this case, it's the C. The frontispiece is always preceding the title. And in the book, you have the frontispiece in the middle, and you have a little bit of the frontispiece displayed there on the left of the title alphabet. And then you have the two titles on both sides. So this is called a triptych, with the image in the middle as you see the book. And then you have also a dedication that I dedicated the book to Bob Reed, not to confound with Bill Reed. They were friends, not related, but same last name. Bob Reed is the one who I worked the most often for designing my book. As I said, I'm not a book designer, I'm not a paper maker, but I work in collaboration, and Bob Reed was very important. He is the one who started the private press movement in Canada in the same year as the livre d'artiste started in Quebec. Interesting coincidence. And so there is also a preface written jointly by the two poets. And the two poets are very, one has written his poems in French, and the other one written his poem in English. So there are 28 images if you include the frontispiece and the P for the preface, because with the preface in the middle you have a painting with the letter P for, and then this is 26 images for 26 letters, and then also a frontispiece and image for the preface. So in total, you have 28 images. And there is also, at the end of the book, in addition to say how it came to start the inspiration, I call it, as well as the colophon. It comes at the end of the book for giving you more information. And so this is another part of the book. There are seven aspects in the book. The colophon is the attributions, who has worked with me in collaboration with me, or I work with them, and with what kind of paper, and I will detail that soon. You have also the logo. The logo is on each one of my book, I have the logo of my, I don't know if I have handy the print, but it's somewhere. I will show you later. But this is printed normally. You will see it on this book at the back on the leather, stamped on the levers. So sometimes we see it. Well, this one will come as a cover on the cover of the book binding. This one, my logo comes with the colophon and at the end on the leather of the book. So this is a logo that says Les Éditions Lucie Lambert. I go by my name as a publisher of Les Éditions Lucie Lambert. And of course, I mentioned the two latches. So this is 7 aspects that consist of the contents of the book. The paper was made to order by Reg Lissel in Vancouver. It's called a paste paper. It's very beautifully done. And the fact that it was handmade, custom handmade, allowed to have on 4 sides the décolte. Décolte is this beautiful ending that is kind of a fringe, and it helps to unify the whole book. And the paper is called paste paper because after you make the very basic paper, you add a paste of iridescent white, combed, like the Japanese would do when they rake their sand garden. So this is the paper that would be very important to have a sturdy paper because there is a lot of manipulation. As you see, this book is not bound. It's loose sheets in the book binding that you see behind the Z. You have a little bit of an image of the book binding. The images, as I said, are of ink and gouache paintings, superimposed with an italic overlaid with gold leaf. The italic letters are superimposed on the images, and they really give they have the power, let's say. I had to have gold really to bring out the importance of the letters in the context of a very colorful at times images, so that often they would even influence the images to be a portrait instead of landscape. So the image says, I am the one who leads the show. And so I designed those letters. I was inspired by Eugène Grasset, who designed his alphabet in 1898, and I chose it. It's an italic. It's not a capital, as you see. It's italic letters, Latin letters. And I modified it to make it my own because I didn't like the stick at the end of those hemps, and made it a little more palatable or round and appealing to me anyway. So that was my starting point. And to draw, but eventually I had to use some tracing paper to transfer my drawing of letters to the paintings. And as you see here, I have not put the gold yet on this one that of course didn't come into the picture for the book, but you can see the tracing from you see, you trace on both sides, so it allows you to be upright and upper side. So it's not a reverse like you would have of any wood blocks or etchings. It would be always a reverse image, but in this case, it's not reversed, and. So I had to choose for each one which letters would work with which image and try. But this, because it's transparent, you can play with them. You know, you have all those letters that are designed, and then you see, of course, the F for fish was nice in English, but doesn't work in French. It's poisson en français. So you can see how this one is designed. And so as I said, it took about 30 years, over 30 years adding paintings, like those ones that you see with the shells the G, the U were done in Vancouver. And it seems that in Vancouver, the frame dropped from working in Paris, where I was not only studying Arabic and Chinese calligraphy, but I was also consulting Oriental manuscripts that had this border that illuminate the text. So I was very drawn by these borders that complement the image and add sort of a dynamic, like the M you have at the background, the Arabic, but the foreground is more of a Chinese calligraphy strokes. And then our Latin letter on top. So it's really a dialogue with other cultures that is happening in this book. Not only that it's in reference to other calligraphies, but it's also that on one side you have French poems, and on the other side you have English poems. And Canada is really known for a bilingual country, and at least we try to promote bilingualism. And in this book, in a sense, it's very Canadian because I have both poems written in French and in English. And now I am coming to the poets. The poets, I have a picture of E.D. Blodgett. He goes by E.D. Blodgett. He is, of course, goes by Ted, but he is, E stands for Edward, and D is for Dickinson, and he is related to Emily Dickinson. I suppose anyway, you have to know, but it's not upfront that he shows that he is related to Dickinson. And they both, I'm sorry, this image is not as good, of Robert Mélenchon and Ted are the... So I had contacted first the French, Robert Mélenchon, to write from the alphabet, and he is the one who came with the form 8 lines. It's called in French huitain, like the letter, the number 8, huitain. I don't think it translates, so we have to use the French word like livre d'artiste. It doesn't translate. Even when you say artist books, it's another tradition, following a very different approach to book. And then, I would like to read, because the poets, not only that they have a form that they both go by, the huitain, but they also have differences. The French one, Robert Mélenchon, his poems stand by themselves. You read one poem and it's complete. For Ted, his poems are connected, loosely connected. And it starts, let's say, with the creation of the universe, and then it unfolds, taking in the history of humankind, referring to Dante for the D, or referring to Rumi for the R, or Narcissus for the N, or Tristan and Isolde for the Y. Anyway, he is it's a very rich, and the other thing that they differ from is that Robert Mélenchon took 2.5 years to write his poem. That explains partially why it took 5 years to produce the book. But Ted was invited later on to come along, and then he wrote his poems in 4 months. And he said he was in a trance. I mean, to write 26 poems of that density took quite a skill. And then, of course, both of them were inspired by my images. And they also take from the letter, not only that the visual is important, of course, but also the sounds. And I want you to hear the sounds of the French. Let's say we'll start with the French because chronologically I started to work with Robert, and it's also the letter A. So I'll read in French the poem so that you can hear the A being very emphasized. And l'abaca qu'on tisse à Manille, la bac qui baille les nombres, l'acacia qu'on dit parfois faux, l'adage où la langue pétille, l'apparat dont certains s'encombrent, l'aquarium fait rêver l'eau, l'arcade où va et vient la ronde, l'alphabet qui contient le monde. And to give you a taste of the English poem written by Ted Blodgett, we chose the letter J, and Zoltán Szigeti is going to read the poem. Thank you.
So J. Patient as the grass, jewels lie wherever they are placed, unjaded, full of light distilled from stone, affable moments in their journeys towards the sky, yet larger than stone, and light, they justify the joy that in their jotting is invisible. Sojourning in jubilee so bountiful, all creation fails to wonder why.
Thank you. So now we are coming to, of course, a very important part of the book is the design of the book. And it happens that the designer of the book is also the printer of the book. And his name is Jason Devinette, working in British Columbia. And I am the publisher, which means that I coordinate all aspects of the production. And so I am sort of a conductor of an orchestra. Because, as I said, I don't know any of those trades, I choose very well my collaborators, and I learn from them, and it's what makes the book very possible, and because I choose, hopefully well, my collaborators and supervise. Like the printing, I am always there with the printer to assist and to make sure that it's exactly how I like it, how I want it. So the typeface of the book is a Garamond, and it's a French typeface. And it's also combined, it was chosen by Jason Devinette. And it's a typeface in relation to Arnaud. Arnaud is those large letters that you see at the bottom. The Arnaud, in a way, is not a typeface, lead typeface. It's a digital typeface, and but it's both the text and the letter are printed from polymer plates. Today, we often work from polymer plates, which gives the same quality as lead types, except that you compose your text on the computer, and then it's transferred into through a photographic medium to a plate that is developed and raised to give this beautiful, there are many of them, you can pass because there are many. And then you can feel the printing is not on the paper, it's in the paper. So you have them here. Arnaud, we added the Arnaud to make an interesting triangle to bring the text in the image with the color gold. And on the left, you have the Roman Arnaud type in capital and lowercase. And on the right, you have the italic Arnaud, capital and lowercase. So each one has its quality. This is for typefaces. So the polymer plates are the medium used to achieve modern-day letterpress printing into the paper, just as traditional lead types pressed into the paper. So then the binding, we come to an end here. The binding is made in Souk. Actually, it was made in British Columbia by Alana Simonson. And it's quite a complex design that is illustrated here some way for the embellishment or the cover. You see the image at the top there, but it's also the same here. It's a large binding that wrap around the book to protect it. And on the upper cover of the book binding, you have this image that starts from a stamp. I didn't show you the stamp.
The little stamp over there?
Yes, there is a stamp there. Looks like, oh yes, that's the stamp. So this is explained in the inspiration, where you have a reference to a stamp that I receive on a letter, ending a correspondence with a very great print collector in Strasbourg. I had a correspondence over 13 years and received 435 letters from that writer, that prints collector of prints. And I didn't know when I received the last of his letter, but it was that stamp that concluded the correspondence, because he died 10 days after I received the letter. So this, I always identified myself when I looked at this stamp because of the image of a woman and the word typography. And then I changed it to make it my own by changing, of course I could not use it because of copyright. So I changed it because I had very simple drawings of myself done in Paris by an Argentinian. And then I changed it, of course, for the title of the book and the name of my edition. And it's quite a process to come to this conclusion, because it takes all kinds of steps to put together, to design the image, but also to come from the little drawing to add to including my logo and the word A for alphabet. And then it goes through a zinc plate that is used for what you see here. It's a stamping. It's not ink. It's a little bit like gold leaf for the book, printed on paper then. The binding, of course, is it's like the dressing. When you present the book, this is what you see first. So it had to be relevant to all aspects of the book. And then to conclude, I would like to thank you for being here, for your curiosity. I have myself benefited tremendously from my collaboration with artisans, of course, with poets first. I worked with 9 different poets, and this is my 13th book. So sometimes I worked more than once with the same poet. It was the case with Ted Blodgett. And then and I worked also with skilled artisans in each of my book. I am also, alphabet is my greatest, alphabets. And why is it there is an S there? Because we are 3, 2 poets and myself, inspired by the alphabets, by the alphabet. So it became alphabets. And it works for both languages. It's the same word. So that was a good find. And this is a livre d'artiste. And I hope that you will take satisfaction now to look closely at the book. And before ending, I would like to read an acknowledgement that is very important to me. I would like, of course, to share my gratitude and happiness that Alphabets has found a home here in Bima. Because its travel to this wonderful collection of artists' books was complicated, let me keep reading the acknowledgement. As you have heard, 3 decades of my creative life went into the paintings which anchor Alphabets. Then 5 years of intense shaping and production followed to create this unique or single painted book. It has taken 7 additional years since its publication date to find an appropriate home for it. Alphabets has a value above the typical rare books acquisition budgets of national libraries, universities, and museums. I know this because my earlier limited edition books are held in more than 60, from 50, now it's 60, such institutions in Europe and North America. Not surprisingly, therefore, at the time of its acquisition by Bima, 2 prestigious institutions with relatively higher budgets were actively pursuing its acquisition: the Boston Athenaeum and the Library of Congress. But by a happy confluence of events, this spring, it found its way to the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art. This was made possible because 3 of my sponsors, either by direct donation to Bima or by direct payment to me, covered half of the price of the book. They were Zoltan's brother, Béla Sigeti, my friend Régent Baudouin. I refer to him as the writer that I lived with for 18 years, Régent Baudouin, and Zoltan himself are the one that covered half of the cost of the book. And then, miraculously, Cynthia Sears covered the other half by a direct donation to BIMA. As a consequence, BIMA owns Alphabet without having to spend any of its own budget. I am grateful to BIMA for accepting Alphabet into its collection, and I am doubly grateful for the 4 individuals who made it possible for BIMA to acquire it. BIMA's dedication to the book arts, enabled by Cynthia's vast collection of artist books, makes this a perfect home for Alphabets. Thank you. And I don't know if we have time for questions because I'm always late when I do a talk. Thank you.